we are going to be learning about adding and subtracting rationals. Now, this is something you've done in the past, but I know it's something that most students do not like that much. We'll start off with some warm-up questions. We have 3/4 plus 1/4, which, if you think about it, that's 3 plus 1 over 4, which is 4 over 4, or 1. Or if you think about it, 3/4, 75 cents, 1/4, 25 cents. That equals $1. 2/5 minus 1/5. Think of that as 2 minus 1 over 5, or just 1 over 5. Pretty simple. Now, one a little bit harder, 1/2 plus 7/8. So I think about it this way, where I want them to have the same denominator. So in this case, I think 8. So to get to 8 on the bottom here, we have to do 4 times 2. So if I do that, I also have to multiply the top by 4. And then this one I would leave the same as 7 over 8. So that's 4 plus 7 over 8, which simplifies to 11 over 8. And there's a number of different ways people did that in class, but just as a basic, that's how you do it. You get the same denominator. So to add or subtract fractions, you must have what we like to call a common denominator. And you're going to be hearing that a lot. How do we get a common denominator? And so that's what we're going to talk about when we're talking about addition and subtraction. How do you find a common denominator? A couple different ways. You can multiply each denominator by each other. Multiply each denominator. Or you can find the least common multiple of the denominators. LCM for short. And we did a warm-up like that. Actually, we did a whole day of finding the least common multiples. So hopefully that's something that you feel comfortable with, is finding the least common multiple. And a lot of times it's factoring out and then finding which factors work for everything else. So, and that's going back to 4th grade. You learned that in 4th grade when you're doing just fractions. So, for example, we have 2/3 plus 4/3. They both have the same denominator. So how I can make that is just 2 plus 4 over 3. I don't have to do anything to anything else because they have the same denominator. That is 6 over 3, or it equals 2. Now I have 5 over 13 minus 7 over 16. I have no idea what the least common multiple is, so I'm just going to multiply each one by the other. And I'm going to, so that means I'm going to have 13 times 16 on the left hand side, so I have to do 5 times 16 because that's what it's missing, so I'm basically multiplying by 1. And then over here I have to do 16 times 13. And so the top I have to multiply by 13. So as you can see, this is 1 and that is 1. So we did not change the fraction in any way other than getting a common denominator. So that means we're going to have 5 times 16 is 80, minus 7 times 13 is 91, and 16 times 13 is 208. So our final answer is negative 11 over 208. I'm going to continue on, assuming you can figure out how to do number 3. Now we take the Magic School Bus. So if you watch that show, Magic School Bus, it's the same theory as 4th grade, but now with we have factors that we have to deal with. We have to find the common denominator to add things up and combine like terms. So we're going to do it the same way. So if you look at number 1, 2 over x plus 3 minus 3 over x minus 4. So if we think about it, that means our common denominator is going to be this times this, because they have nothing in, they aren't the same. So that's x plus 3 times x minus 4. So if you ask yourself the question, what do I need to multiply the 2 by? What was it missing? It's missing the x minus 4. So I have 2 times x minus 4. And then if you ask yourself, what is the 3? What do I have to multiply it by? You have to multiply it by x plus 3, the other factor. And so then, when we're solving, we get 2 times x minus 4, which is 2x minus 8, plus 3 times x plus 3, so that's plus 3x plus 9, all over x plus 3 times x minus 4, which we're just going to leave it like that. X plus 3 times x minus 4. I am okay with you leaving the denominator as factored. And so then we just combine like terms on the top. 2x plus 3x is 5x. Negative 8 plus 9 is plus 1, all over x plus 3 times x minus 4. That's our final answer for number 1. So take a look at it. We multiplied each numerator by the denominator that it was missing to come up with our common denominator. So for the number 2, it's going to be very similar. If we think about 2x plus 1 and x minus 6 in the denominators, they aren't the same, they don't factor out at all. So that is going to be our common denominator. It's going to be 2x plus 1 times x minus 6. And so that means I need to multiply the 1 by x minus 6, because that's what it's missing. And I have to multiply the negative 3 times 2x plus 1, because that's the factor it was missing. So when I do that, 1 times x minus 6 is just x minus 6. Minus 3 times 2x is minus 6x. Minus 3 times 1 is minus 3, all over 2x plus 1 times x minus 6. So now we just combine like terms. So we're in with negative 5x minus 9 over this whole denominator. 2x plus 1 times x minus 6. And that's our final answer. All right, let's flip over the page. Give me a second here. And we're going to do a few of these examples. So just remember, before we can add or subtract, sometimes we need to factor each fraction to see if there's any common denominator parts. Then find the common denominator and move on like above. So we're taking it another step further. We need to factor out the denominators of each. So if we look, number 1, 1 over x minus 7 and x squared minus 4x minus 21. So if we look at the x squared minus 4x minus 21, and I use my a times c method, I'm going to end up with x minus 7 times x plus 3. And you can see x times x is x squared, negative 7x plus 3x is negative 4x, negative 3 times 3, negative 7 times 3 is negative 21. So those are the factors. Now, when we are picking our common denominator, First, we look and see what do they have in common. So this has an x minus 7 and this has an x minus 7. So we only need to list that one time. If both things we're adding or subtracting have one part that's the same, leave it. And then we also have to put in the part that is anything else that's different. So the x plus 3 is only with one of them, but we need to include that as part of our common denominator because the common denominator includes everything. Okay? Alright, so if we look up at the top, we have 1 over x minus 7. What does the 1 need to multiply by? Well, this x minus 7, what it's missing that's in the common denominator is an x plus 3. So we have to multiply the 1 times x plus 3. And this is why it's important to factor it out. If we didn't factor it out, we would be multiplying 1 times x squared minus 4x minus 21. And our answer, we would not be able to simplify how we would need to. And then the 4. Well, its denominator for the 4 is the entire common denominator, x minus 7 times x plus 3. So we just have to say plus 4. So x plus 3 plus 4 gives us x plus 7 over x minus 7 times x plus 3. And I'm okay leaving it as it's factored. Excuse me. If you want to, you can multiply out the bottom, but you don't really need to. All right, let's look at number 2. All right, so we have x squared plus 3x minus 10. I want to factor this out using a times c. The two numbers that multiply to be negative 10 and add up to 3 are 5 and negative 2. So I'm going to have x plus 5 times x minus 2. And we can't really see that very well. But what you can see is that the x plus 5's match up. So that is going to be one part of our denominator, x plus 5. And then the only other part of the denominator we're missing that we need to take into account is x minus 2. So that means the 6 needs to multiply by the part of the denominator it does not have, which is x minus 2. And then we subtract, and the 4x minus 7, it needs to multiply by just 1 because it has the entire common denominator, x plus 5 and x minus 2. So now we can simplify. So we get 6x minus 12 minus 4x plus 7 all over x plus 5 times x minus 2. And then we can make that 2x minus 5 over x plus 5 times x minus 2. Alright, so those first two are fairly simple. The third one, we're going to skip the third one because it's very similar. The fourth one, we're going to try because this one's a little bit different. So these ones are not x squared terms, but we see they can still factor. On the first one, we can take out a 4, it becomes x minus 3. On the second one, if you take out a 4, you get x plus 4. So now you have to ask yourself, what is my common denominator? Well, they both have 4. I only need to list that one time. And then each of these are different. So 4 times x minus 3 times x plus 4. And then the numerator, so this 2, you need to multiply it by what it's missing. What it's missing is x plus 4, because it's not over here. And then the 5, or the minus 5, it's missing this x minus 3. That's what it needs to multiply by. So when we simplify that, we get 2x plus 8 minus 5x plus 15 all over 4 times x minus 3 times x plus 4. And then finally we just simplify it. Negative 3x plus 23 over this whole thing. So if you can find the common denominator, you're going to be in good shape. And just remember that you multiply the numerator by the part that's missing, the denominator part that it's missing. And then the last one I'm going to do is going to be 6, since there's a little more space. So, or let's see, should I do 5 or 6? Let's do 5. Let's do 5. And if I have to stretch it over, I'll do that. So 5. We can look and see. Let's find the common denominator. This becomes 2 times x plus 2. I'm going to do x squared minus 4x minus 12. 8 times c is negative 12. The two numbers that multiply to be negative 12 and add up to negative 4 are negative 6 and positive 2. So I have x minus 6 times x plus 2. So that means my common denominator is 2. And then they both have an x plus 2. And then there's an x minus 6 left over that we need to include. When I do my numerator, this 1, it needs to multiply by the factor it's missing, which is the x minus 6. And then the x plus minus 9 needs to multiply by the factor it's missing, which it has an x minus 6 and an x plus 2. It's only missing the 2. So when we do that, this just becomes x minus 6 plus 2x minus 18 all over the same thing again. 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 6. And finally we end up with 3x minus 24 over 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 6. And there you go. So remember your basic steps. Factor only the denominator. Don't worry about the numerator. Find the common denominator, which will include factors. Multiply each numerator by the missing factors from its denominator. Add or subtract the numerators only. All right. Hopefully that helps you with adding and subtracting. We'll be back again with more lessons very soon.